Okay. All right, so thank you all for coming to week 2 of Targeting the World's Largest Buyer. This week's edition is talking about alphabet soup, basically the different types of contract vehicles, acquisition thresholds, things like that, all the acronyms that make government contracting so much fun. The goal here is to try and, make some of it make more sense, realize that, some of it is, a lot of it's more of the same than it is different, and talk about the importance of, each type of contract vehicle and why it's important to you and your business. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about in the next hour is going to be who we are as the SBDC and PTAC and how we can help your business. If you were here last week, that'll be a lot of repeat, but I'll go through it quickly. The acquisition thresholds, contracting vehicles like I just mentioned, and we're also going to talk a lot about sources sought. That's going to kind of be a theme throughout all of the webinars that we're doing in this series because they are very important to small businesses. It can be a really valuable opportunity when building your, when building up your government contracting market. And then at the end, I'll open it up for Q&A. Again, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go. I'm happy to answer them as we're going along. So who we are as the SBDC, we are part of a national network of over 1,000 centers in every state and territory, I believe. So no matter where you go in the country, there's going to be an SBDC in your area that can help you and provide the same general business consulting services that we can here at Lehigh. So business planning, starting a business, financing help, marketing, basically any kind of general business need, the SBDC will be able to help. In the state of Pennsylvania, we are one of 18 centers across the state. And additionally, in the Southeast region here, since all of you might be coming from slightly different places, that there are 4 main ones in our region. There's Kutztown, Widener, and Temple, as well as Lehigh. And additionally, Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania also has a small center, but they cover a very small section of Philadelphia. Our services are free. We're funded through the Small Business Administration on the federal level and the Department of Community and Economic Development on the state level. So as a result, all of our one-on-one consulting services are free to our clients. We also provide educational opportunities such as this one and other types of seminars. Most of them, if we do charge, are very low cost because, again, we want everybody to be able to attend and learn. But for the government contracting side of things, all of those seminars are going to be free. So all we ever ask for in exchange, since we don't charge, is we usually, if you're a client of ours, we send out 1 to 2 surveys a year, depending on the services that you use. And also we will ask for support letters to our legislators. They're the ones who decide how much funding we get every year, and it's important for them to know that their dollars are being put to good use and that they're, that the assistance that we're providing is useful to their constituents. Additionally, one of the things that makes us unique here in the Southeast region of Pennsylvania is that we are one of only a few SBDCs in the country that also houses a Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or a PTAC. In many parts of both the state and the country, these are 2 completely separate organizations. So you would be doing your government contracting work with the PTAC and any of your general business consulting needs with the SBDC. Fortunately, here in the Southeast region of Pennsylvania, we have both under one roof, so we can work with, you can be working with somebody on your general business needs and your government contracting needs and not having to, deal with multiple layers of people. So the PTACs are specifically designed to help more small businesses get into government. The federal government wants more small businesses in contracting to get a more diverse supplier base, to help grow small businesses, get more quality products, get more innovative products. And part of it is too for price competition, but a lot of it's to help grow small businesses and grow innovation. So what we're designed to do is help you market to the government and help you navigate the process of becoming a contractor. So we can help you with training like we're doing today. We do our one-on-one consulting just like the SBDC side. So we can work with you and help develop a specific plan for your government contracting strategy. We can help with paperwork. So if you're looking to apply for a certification, like we talked about last week, or if you're, submitting a bid and want us to look it over, make sure, nothing major is missing, we can certainly do that. And additionally, we also have our bid match service, which is a free service available to our clients that will search daily based on your NAICS codes and keywords for federal, state, local, and even international contract opportunities. So if you aren't part of BidMatch now and you are interested, just let me know, send me an email, give me a call, and we can get you set up. All right, so now to what we're actually here to talk about. So one of the biggest things to understand about the different contracting ways government, both at the federal and state level, can purchase things is to understand the acquisition thresholds or the dollar amounts where certain rules take place and what methods they have to use to be able to purchase things. So naturally, the federal government's going to be the more complicated of the two. Anything under $3,500 is considered no competition. It's considered a micro purchase. So basically, they use their government purchase card and go out and buy whatever it is they need. They're supposed to shop around, but they don't have to get any kind of formal quotation or any kind of proof. They just shop around and get what they need. The link there for GSA Smart Pay, that's information on the government purchase card. If you accept, I believe it's Visa and MasterCard, if your merchant services, if you take credit cards and your merchant services accepts Visa and MasterCard, you're able to just use, you don't have to get anything special done to accept the government purchase card. They work just like a regular corporate credit card. So you don't have to do anything special. So you could, in theory, already be selling to the government and not even know it. But more information is available at that link. Anything above that micro purchase threshold from $3,500 to $25,000 is considered an informal quote process. So you don't have to submit a full-blown formal proposal. All you have to do is, all a contracting officer has to do is get 3 quotes from from an interested party. So they basically have a list of possible vendors. They'll call 3 of them, get a price, and basically generally award it to the lowest price. And these are supposed to be quote unquote publicly posted, but many times that means an obscure website that you may not know about, or the classified section of your local newspaper, things like that. So so it's important to note that you have to do a little more research and a little more marketing if your average ticket falls into that category. Anything over $25,000 has to be posted on FedBizOps, which is the federal government's place where all of the large contracting opportunities are listed. So anything over $25,000 has to be posted on there. You may find things under $25,000 there, but it's highly unlikely because, again, it's a much more involved process. The important thing to note for small businesses is that anything from $3,500 to $150,000 falls under what's known as the simplified acquisition threshold. And it's automatically set aside for small businesses. So your GEs, your General Dynamics, your Boeings, they can't compete in this sector. So anything in that dollar amount is automatically set aside for small business, and the acquisition procedures are a lot more streamlined. So you don't, so it's not going to be as complicated as your multi-million dollar contracts. Anything over $150,000 is full and open competition. So you are competing against the large prime contractors, but sometimes your certifications, if you have them, can play in there. And anything over $700,000 for a general contract, or over $1.5 million for a construction contract, those awardees are required to have a subcontracting plan. Now, I would assume that probably the majority of you would not be bidding on a contract that large as a prime contractor, but it's important to note that if you fall into, especially the construction category, that you'll want to see what those contracts are, who's winning them, because you want to make sure that you're on their list to be when they're looking for subcontractors. Okay, so it's important to note, but these thresholds are important because once you know what your average ticket is for your product or service, that'll help you devise your marketing strategy to know who you have to target, and whether you're competing against the big guys or you're under that micro purchase threshold. It's important to know when you're developing your marketing strategy. Thankfully, Pennsylvania makes life a lot easier. They basically only have three thresholds. The only difference is that Pennsylvania distinguishes between a materials contract, which is supplies, goods, stuff, or a services contract. So, IT consulting, IT work, things like that. For anything under $10,000 for a material or service contract is done no bid, no documentation. It's just done through the government purchase card. They're supposed to shop for the best deal, but they're not required to really provide any kind of proof on that. And that's the responsibility of the agency. The Department of General Services does not get involved. It's just up to the individual agencies to make those types of purchases. For a materials contract between $10,000 and $100,000 and a services contract between $10,000 and $250,000, those are done through a formal request for proposal, but they're managed by the agency. So again, it's going to be the individual agency that's working on those. And for anything above those dollar amounts, for $100,000 or $250,000, those are again formal requests for proposal managed by the Department of General Services. So they're the ones that are, issuing the RFP, making the award decision, and managing the contract. Okay. And anything for the state that's above $25,000 has to be posted on the e-marketplace, which is Pennsylvania's version of FedBizOps. And we'll talk about that more when we next week when we do the market research. But all of those will be posted as well. Okay. So now that we've covered the acquisition thresholds, again, those are important to know where to look, where to target, to make sure you're marketing to the right people. If you're marketing to, if you're looking at all of the big giant contracts, but your, average bill for your services in that simplified acquisition range, you're going to be ending up spending a lot more time and effort and resources where you don't need to be. So it's important to know those dollar thresholds when you market. And additionally, it's also important to note all of the acronyms, again, the alphabet soup of government contracting. Now I'm going to talk about most of these. Some of them I was just looking for acronyms, so I put them in there. But we're going to talk about all these acronyms and why, how they're important to your business. Okay. So first is the request for proposal or the invitation for bid. This is the most common one. These are the formal, these are the formal ones that you send the big giant pile of paper to the agency. They go through it. It takes you, hours, if not days, to put these together. Again, Pennsylvania, I think, calls them invitations for bid, but the federal government calls them requests for proposal. These are going to be on the federal side for contract amounts above $25,000 and in Pennsylvania above $10,000. These do require significant paperwork and preparation, so they're a lot more involved than just simply submitting a price or point, click, and buy. They all are also evaluated on multiple factors. These are not simply price-based. These are they're based on responsibility, reasonability. Again, it's a whole package deal. For example, if you're bidding on a contract in Pennsylvania and your company is based in Pennsylvania and your closest competitor is based in Oregon, even if your price is a little higher, they may be more willing to give the contract to you because you're closer and you have more knowledge of the area, instead of them having to bring in people and possibly, depending on the type of contract, it could severely increase the ultimate cost of that contract. So price is not, for a request for proposal, price is not always the determining factor. Okay. Your request for quote is an informal proposal. This is basically, for smaller dollar contracts, under $25,000 on the federal side. These are minimal paperwork or preparation. You just basically submit, at most, maybe like a purchase order, a sample purchase order or invoice, where you're just going to give a price, basically a proposal saying, we can provide you X widgets by this date for this amount of money. These are essentially evaluated on price because you're, the contracting officer saying, I need, 10 of these widgets by the end of the month. How much is it going to cost me? So they're basically usually going to pick the lowest price. Okay. And the important thing to note about requests for quote on the federal level is that a contracting officer only needs to get 3 quotes for it to be considered competitive. So what's important to note here is that if you fall within that dollar amount, between $3,500 and $25,000, that contracting officers probably already have a list of people that they call for these types of contracts. So they're not going to go out and specifically look for you if you've never done business with them before. So it's important to note that your marketing strategy is going to have to be a little more involved and nuanced if you fall within this typical dollar range, because you're going to have to essentially find who these contracting officers are, reach out to them, get on their list. Okay. So those were the two most basic kind, the request for proposal, request for quote. Those are the most commonly known ones. Now we're going to talk about the ones that are a little more complicated. Okay. And the most complicated and popular of them is the Gsa Schedule, also known as an MAS, multiple award schedule, federal supply schedule, a GWAC, or a BPA. These are all basically more or less the same thing. And they just have different terminologies because, like a GSA schedule is managed directly by GSA. Some of the others are managed by GSA or managed by other agencies or, whatever. So they all have different terms, but they're all schedules in that you have to apply and be accepted in order to sell on it. You can't just decide, okay, I'm going to sell on a GSA schedule today and put your product up there like you do on Amazon. You do have to be accepted into the program. And these are known as multiple award, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. And what that means, hopefully I can explain it simply, is a multiple award contract means that multiple companies are awarded a contract. So it's not just on your typical request for proposal, the government will award it to your company. Well, in this case, they can award it to hundreds of companies, and so you're all able to win business on that contract. Okay? And how it typically works is a contracting officer will issue a task order, which is just a one-off individual, we need, X widgets, or we need this service specifically. And then all the companies that are on that schedule, they either have their prices posted or they bid on it or they put in their quote depending on the system. And then the contracting officer decides, who gets it from there. So that's what a multiple award means. The IDIQ portion means that for a fixed set of time, you can get zero business, or you can get all of the business, or you can get somewhere in the middle. Indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. And so that does mean that there is no guaranteed minimum or maximum sales or volume. So you could be on one of these schedules and never have a single sale, or you could end up, especially if you say you undercut your pricing just to get sales, you could be overwhelmed with sales and not be able to perform on the contracts. So it's important to, one, make sure that you don't undercut yourself on price on purpose, and you have to be adaptable to handle various order sizes. Again, you could get, one order in the entire, say it's a 2-year contract, you could get one order in that entire time, or you could get dozens of orders and be overwhelmed. The important thing to note, especially about GSA schedule, is that there are minimum sales requirements. So you can, I believe with GSA schedule, it's $25,000. So if you don't meet that, you can actually be kicked off the contract for not meeting sales. It is very common for businesses not to get sales on GSA schedules for a number of reasons, mostly because they don't properly market themselves. Just because you're on the GSA schedule doesn't mean that that contracting officers are going to automatically find you and buy from you. You still have to let them know you exist, because again, you could still be one of hundreds of companies that are on this schedule, right? And again, all of these, all of those 5 different types of contracts are the same thing. They just go by different names based on who's managing them, and there's slight nuances between them. For example, a GWAC is an IT-only contract, so if you ever hear the term GWAC, it's only related to IT. The other ones just kind of depend on who's managing them and what agencies are using them. So because GSA schedule is overly complicated, it can be expensive to get on it. And again, since you're competing against a much, with hundreds of other possibilities, you're not necessarily guaranteed to get sales. So it may not be, especially if you're relatively new to contracting, it may not be your most economical option at this stage. So what I usually recommend to clients is to look at CoStars. CoStars is a similar multiple award IDIQ contract with the state of Pennsylvania. It's the same concept in that you have to apply to it and be accepted in order to sell on CoStars. And it's the same concept as GSA schedule in that, people buy off of it just like GSA schedule, but the difference is the target audience. GSA schedule is, the buyers on GSA schedule are government agencies. With CoStars, it's actually no government agencies actually buy from CoStars. It's only municipal governments, nonprofits, religious and educational organizations. It's all, sort of that semi-nonprofit, those organizations like fire companies, EMS, things like that. And they, the state of Pennsylvania offers them, offers companies to be able to sell to these organizations, and also organizations are likely to buy off of it because they see it as sort of a good housekeeping seal of approval that the government has vetted these companies, and they think that they're at least getting the lowest price. Now, that's not always true, but you may have, if you've been trying to sell to organizations like this, CoStars may be a good place to go. It's a great starting point if you're looking at GSA schedule or any of the other GSA type schedules in the federal government. There's lower fees. I think they're 2-year contracts, and I think CoStarz is about $500 for a small business. GSA is quite a bit more, and they're a lot less stringent. I don't believe that CoStarz has any kind of minimum sales requirements, but if they are, they're not going to be nearly as stringent as GSA. The link there will take you right to the supplier information page for CoStarz. The important thing to note for that is not every single industry category is going to be available on CoStarz. It's typically products. There are some services, but it's going to be mostly a product-based program. So make sure you can look on there at the different schedules. So just to make sure before you go into it full force that you do actually, that your product or service is available for sale on CoStarz. But I do highly recommend it. And of course, if you're looking to get on either GSA schedule, CoStarz, or any of the other award schedules, we can gladly help you walk through that process. So a lot of people, when they come to us, think that they need to get on GSA schedule right away, that this is going to be the key to their business. And also there's a big trend of government moving towards these type of schedules. So why it's important is government has been looking lately, especially on the federal side, to integrate how they do their procurement. Right now, each agency essentially manages their own procurement. Agencies do buy off of GSA schedule, but they can have their own multiple type of award contracts. They do their own individual requests for proposals. It's not like the state of Pennsylvania where the Department of General Services kind of manages most of that. Each agency does their own thing. So what government's trying to do is create greater efficiency, lower costs, and hopefully get lower prices by bringing everybody together under these multiple award schedules. It creates point-and-click buying in many cases. You can look at, and I'll show you the website next week for when we do the market research, but the GSA Advantage website, you can actually go and just browse and point and click and buy anything from office supplies to IT services to large water filters, basically whatever you could possibly want. It's essentially the Amazon for government. So it creates a much more efficient purchasing program for the government. And so there's a big push towards that with the acquisition gateway, which I'm going to show you in these next 2 slides. An article that I actually just read this morning that I linked here is that there's a push within GSA and within the government to actually remove prices and evaluation criteria, because what's happening is, with these GSA schedules, prices are very open and very transparent. And, vendors on the GSA schedule are basically asked to rate themselves, basically give their own evaluation criteria. So what this is looking to do is base awards on, when they're doing their evaluation, base it on non-price factors such as reasonability and responsibility and, other technical factors depending on the procurement. And then finally, when they've decided all that, then look at price as a determining factor at the end. So that article is there. It's an interesting read. But it is something, it's not in effect yet, but it is something that will likely be in effect within the next few years. So the acquisition gateway is GSA's move towards, bringing everything together under one kind of umbrella location for government procurement. It just was open to the public, I believe, in March of this year. So you can't access the same kind of information that government buyers can, but you can access a lot of valuable information, a lot of valuable market research that will be beneficial to your business as you're trying to figure out, one, who to sell to and how to actually sell it. So the important things to note here when you get to the acquisition gateway, turn on my little pen here. Okay. There are these what's called hallways. These are kind of the main categories that are on the GSA type schedules. There are others, but these are kind of the main ones. And it'll give you different resources, articles, procurement history, things like that. So if you fall into one of these specific categories, you can go in there and get some more information. Also under the resources, there's the small business forecast, which I'll be touching on next week. This is a good place to find out which agencies, what agencies are looking to buy in the coming years, how much of that from small business are they looking to do, specifically with service-disabled vets or HubZone or woman-owned. You can see that kind of information in here. Additionally, I haven't looked at this one specifically, but the statement of work library, a lot of clients do come to me and ask like, okay, well, what does a sample proposal look like? You can find sample statements of work in here. Again, I'll look at those for maybe next week to provide some more detail, but you're free to look at those as well. But the most valuable benefit here is the solutions finder. And what you can do is pick, if you're looking to sell to specific agencies, category, if you're IT or manufacturing, construction, office, all of these different categories here in the hallway, you can pick that. And then your subcategory narrows it down, like you could do IT consulting here. So this is an example of if we did that, I decided, okay, we're looking to sell to the Army and we do IT consulting. So those are my filters. And what it does is it shows you all of the multiple award schedules that, fit that, the Army can buy IT consulting off of. As you can see, this is just a handful. There's 17 different multiple award schedules that the Army can buy off of for IT consulting, which, really is nuts, but that's how it is. So what's important to note here is you can see, again, all of those acronyms that we talked about are here. Like I said, they're all basically the same thing. They just have different names. They show you who manages it, and pretty much in all the cases shown here, it's GSA. But it can be, it can be the agency itself. It could be say a couple of DoD agencies, if it's for the military. And the other thing to note here is the availability. It shows who is allowed to buy off of these contracts. So for example, all of these, any DoD or civilian agency can buy off of all of these contracts. So what you can do for more information is you can click right here to the solution website. So this would take you to the Alliant, for example, the Alliant Small Business Contract. And you can look at the terms and conditions to see what is, to see what's involved in that contract. Okay. The different fee structures for vendors selling on these contracts. And you can also narrow it down further as you go over, you can change your categories and subcategories, but this is a good way to see, what agencies are buying off of which contracts, and say you work with maybe 2 or 3 agencies that you commonly sell to, you can see if all of them would be covered by that or if you have to be on multiple different contracts. Okay. I do have a question here that's asking, what's your opinion on using multiple award schedules for custom ordered products? You can actually use them. The thing is, usually if it's a custom order product, you just put in there that it's custom ordered, what facets of it are custom ordered. You can do that. It's the same example with trying to package a service, because you can put services on the GSA schedule. So you have to be able to package it into something that's, that would be considered quote unquote like a normal buy. So as long as your product is something that's standard, it just has custom features to it, then I would recommend it. If it's super, if it's a superly custom product, then, it might not be the right place, but that's something we could also talk about, one-on-one if you're looking at that. But you can pretty much sell whatever you want on those types of schedules with no problem. Okay. So another thing I wanted to note about GSA type schedules is that Pennsylvania has a unique kind of system that sounds like a GSA schedule, but it's not. And it's called their invitation to qualify. And Pennsylvania uses the ITQs for specialty materials or services. For example, consulting services, anywhere from consulting services to specific environmental products that they need, anywhere where they have a specific need, a common need for a product, they will usually have an ITQ. You do have to apply to be accepted. So it does sound like a GSA schedule in that regard, but all qualifying does is mean you can bid. It doesn't actually, it's not like a GSA schedule where the agencies will buy from you. You still have to submit your bid like you would any regular request for proposal. So it just means that if you weren't on that, if you didn't qualify and they can't, so you do IT consulting and they come out with an IT consulting contract, if you're not a member of that ITQ, you're not going to be allowed to bid on that. Okay? So you still submit the regular proposals just like you normally would. It's just basically another step to qualify so you can do that. The website there will take you right to the ITQ homepage. You can see which categories have an ITQ. There's no cost to do it. It's free. The proposals, Again, depending on the industry, can be a little involved, but they're not unbearable. Again, we can help you through it. But if you do fall into one of those categories, I would strongly suggest going through the ITU process. That way, if something comes up, you're ready to go. So now that we've talked about all of the different contract vehicles that are out there, the multiple award schedules, request for proposal, request for quote, there's, the other question is, well, how do they decide how they're going to actually, where they're going to buy these products from? Are they going to use a GSA schedule? Are they going to go out with a full proposal? So on and so forth. How do they actually determine how they do this? And that's known as what's called a sources sought. And again, for those of you who were here last week, some of this is going to be repeat, but I'm going to go a little deeper this time. And a sources sought is important because of the acquisition process. This is a DoD example of their acquisition lifecycle, but it applies, the same function applies to any procurement within the government. Basically, they end up defining a need. Then they form a team that's going to, put the contract together. They're going to review their current strategy, which means how have they been buying this product before? What, are the current needs the same as they were in the past? Do these companies still exist that have provided it in the past? Things like that. Then the next step is market research. So just like you do market research to see who buys your product, who uses your service, they're going to do the same thing. So they look at the market to see who makes this product, who provides this service. Are there any specific set-asides that are have a dominance in this? For example, our service, if it's an IT contract, do service disabled veterans have a higher presence in this than others? To find different suppliers. Then they define the requirements, build the statement of work, determine how they're going to acquire the product, whether it's through an RFP, GSA schedule, something like that. And then they get to the point where they actually do that thing. So they either buy it off the GSA schedule or they issue the RFP in step 6. So where sources sought are important is here in market research. Okay. A sources sought is essentially a request for information. They're just looking to see who can do this thing that we're looking to do. And why it's important to respond to those is a lot of businesses will say, okay, well, I don't have the time to respond to that. I'm not really going to get anything out of it. I'm just responding to something basically saying, hi, here I am, I do this, and you may not ever hear back. So why is it worth the time? Well, a sources sought helps determine how they're going to actually procure the product. If you wait until they issue the RFP, you're already at step 6 in the acquisition process. So they've already determined the scope of work, they've already determined how they're going to procure it, and so you're just waiting for them to issue the request for proposal. But if you respond to the RFP, or if you respond to the sources sought, you're helping them determine the scope of work, because you may have a unique way or an innovative way to do the thing that they may not have otherwise thought about, and they may include that in the scope of work, which could, again, limit the competition. It'll also determine if there's any set-asides, which I'll talk about in a couple slides. And it'll also help in determining how they're going to acquire the product or service. So if you're thinking they're going to issue an RFP, they may actually buy it off of GSA schedule, and you may never see that again because that's where they've gone to get it. So if you're not on GSA schedule, you're going to miss out. So the more involved you are, the earlier on you're involved in the process, the more likely you are to have an influence on and also know where this acquisition is going. So again, it's very important. The earlier on you're involved, the more likely you are to have a scope of work that's shaped towards something that you can do, maybe set aside towards one of your certifications, and decide. And if you're on GSA schedule, you'll know about it ahead of time. Or if it's an RFP, you're already ready to go when the RFP actually comes out, because it's coming. And sometimes, whether it's totally allowed or not, sometimes contracting officers will only issue the RFP to people that respond to the sources sought. So again, this is a gold mine for small businesses. So sources sought is, again, it's just pre-solicitation market research. They're just looking to see who's out there. Either we have somebody that's been doing this and we want to see if there's other people out there that can do it, or this is something new that we're trying and we want to see, maybe we want to see if there's any hub zone businesses that can do this because we're really low on that set aside. These aren't formal RFPs. These are maybe I would say at most a 10-page response, if that. It's only going to be send your capability statement and a small narrative saying how you can do the thing. They're not going to be very complicated unless it's a specifically complicated, like sometimes your engineering contracts, a military, designing military products, something like that might be a little more involved. But it's basically, they're just trying to get an idea of who's out there. The source of SOTs can affect set-asides depending on how many people respond. Can help shape the scope of work. Like I said, they're going to base the scope of work based on their market research, on who's responding to these notices. And it's a great way for small business to be recognized because you're submitting information to a contracting officer that you otherwise wouldn't have submitted. If you submit just with the RFP, they're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of people responding to these RFPs, and they're not going to really pay attention to each individual one until it gets to a later stage. And by that point, you may have already been weeded out. So with the sources sought, you're making the contracting officers aware that you exist. And how that can actually affect your set-asides is through the rule of two. If a contracting officer can determine from their market research, meaning just general market research or a sources sought notice, that 2 or more vendors from a specific set-aside are likely to respond with reasonable and responsible bids, they can set it aside for that socioeconomic status. So if you're a service-disabled veteran and you respond to that and somebody else responds to that, then you're going to actually have a likelier chance of that getting set aside for service-disabled veterans. Whereas if you don't respond, you're just taking a chance that it might get set aside for what your set-aside is. So it's very important, again, if you have a certification, to respond to these sources sought, especially because you can help determine the set-asides. So as an example, I found 2 different types of sources sought. After you do the survey, when you get the link to the presentation, there's also going to be links to these 2. I put PDF versions of these sources sought. I just took excerpts from each one just to kind of get an idea of what they're about. This one is looking for I believe it's a specific part, but basically all they're looking for is company name, address, and point of contact, so they can determine who's involved in your company with government contracting. Your DUNS number and cage code, which you should already have if you're registered with the federal government. Your business size, which means if you're a small business, and any classifications like certifications that you have, and a capability statement showing that you can, including past performance, that you're likely to be able to do the project, and also if you're including past performance, what they want you to include. So it's very simple. It's only 3 steps. Most of that you should already have on your capability statement. The only thing that you may have to do, this one specifically later on says that they don't just want a generic capability statement, they want it specific to the project. But if you already have your capability statement designed, it's just a simple, simple editing of a couple things and you'll be good to go. So again, compared to submitting a full-blown proposal, this is very easy. And again, depending on what they do with that, it may end up in an RFP that's more suited towards your business because you submitted that you are more likely to be able to do this than somebody else. A second example, this is actually just a survey. So, they'll usually say it's not a request for quote. This is not an actual request. They're just looking for information. They just have to put all that in there. But the Defense Logistics Agency basically buys this part from this company. And as far as the Defense Logistics Agency is concerned, this company is the only one that makes this product, this part. Okay, it's a unique part. So what they're looking for is to determine if there are other companies that can make this part to see if they can maybe get a lower price or at least have multiple people to buy this part from to get better competition. So, they're saying they're looking for alternate products that could be procured in place of the below described item, which I didn't include in here. That's in the PDF that will be with the presentation. And again, it's like a 15 or 20 question survey. You're basically just checking a bunch of boxes and determining, they just want to see, are there other people that make this part? And if there are, then they might open up to competition and could open yourself up to business that you otherwise wouldn't have had. So again, this is basically the end of the main content of what we're talking about. I hope that maybe cleared up some of the issues, with dealing with, the different types of contract vehicles out there, to understand that, there's not just the request for proposals, that there's many other ways that you can sell your product or service. And that if you maybe are having trouble finding opportunities, that maybe your product or service is being typically bought on the GSA schedule. So there's ways that, we'll talk about market research next week, that there's ways that you can find that information out, and it can help you find out what's out there, who's buying your product on what vehicle. So next week, we're going to be talking about mastering market research. Like I said, we're going to go, a lot of the things that we talked about today, we're going to go over in more detail. We'll talk about the acquisition gateway some more. We'll talk about forecasts. We're going to talk about source assault a little more. We covered the majority of it today, but we'll talk about more next week. Resources that we have some internal resources that we can help you with market research to determine, agencies that are buying, forecasting, things like that. And also where you can go on your own to look at historical purchases and, again, figure out which agencies are buying your product. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about marketing to contracting officers. And what that's going to be is focusing on capability statements, some do's and don'ts, also ways that you can find out small business contacts at larger prime companies if you're looking to subcontract, ways to figure out where matchmaking events are going on, and just some general tips and marketing tricks to, since even though marketing to government is somewhat similar to marketing to the private sector, it's still a different animal that you have to do in a unique way because it's the government and everything has to be different with them. Okay. So if you are interested in talking to me or any of our other centers anymore, my direct line here at Lehigh is up there. Again, there's 3 other centers that are also PTACs in the Southeast region. We do not compete for clients, so if you either live in the service territory for Kutztown, Temple, or Widener, or they're more logistically close to you to work with them, that's absolutely fine. Their contact information is there. We don't, I'm not going to get mad if you prefer one of them over us. But we are free, available to help you. So you can feel free to give me a call, send me an email. Our social media pages are up there. It's just a shameless plug since I'm the one who manages those. We post our upcoming seminars. We post, other general information for general business as well as contracting. It's not just limited to government contracting. And our website will have a list of all of our upcoming seminars, both, again, general business and government contracting. You can find out more about our other programs if you haven't used them in the past. So I thank you all for attending today. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. If anybody wants to use a mic, I'll unmute everybody. So if you have questions, feel free. Otherwise, thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing hopefully all of you next week. And like I said, I'll send out the survey this afternoon. Once you complete the survey, you'll get a link to the presentation, and from that point forward, you'll be able to watch the recording later on. All right. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the day.